Podcast Colby, the show that keeps you entertained of songs, apps, etc., etc., etc.
Hello, I'm Sarah, Master Podcaster, and Podcast Colby is the podcast to listen to.
Hey everyone, welcome to Podcast Colby. I'm your host, Colby Beach. Hey everybody, I'm your host, Colby Beach, here live, Podcast Colby, episode number 13. It is June 21st, 8:54 a.m. And I'm going to check the weather for you guys. It is 66 degrees out here in New York. It's nice and sunny out. So, before we get into our usual routine, what I'm going to talk about is, you might have seen some new videos that are on Podcast Colby on my site. They're called Podcast Infoman. And what Podcast Infoman is, it's one of my new podcasts that's going to be up on iTunes. My first and second episode is on iTunes. What it's going to be about, it's kind of like Podcast Answer Man, and if you know Cliff Ravenscraft is, he does the Podcast Answer Man. And Podcast Infoman is going to be the podcast that's going to help your podcast get up and running. So go check that out on YouTube and iTunes, but it won't be posted on my website because that's the Podcast Colby website. Go on my website, podcastcolby.com. Follow me on Twitter, Podcast Colby. Like me on Facebook, Podcast Colby, and that's about it. Right? Oh, subscribe, comment, like, whatever you want to do. I'll say that at the end. Okay, so now let's get into the usual routine. What do you think is the usual routine? So, we're going to take out both of the song of the day and the app of the day. Then we're going to put the sports game of the day, and the podcast of the day. So this is going to be pretty cool. So, the sports center of the day is, the sports game of the day is, it is last night's game 7 in the NBA Finals. So last night's game was Game 7 in the NBA Finals, and the Heat won. The Miami Heat beat the Spurs and won the NBA Final Trophy, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah. Now let's go to the podcast of the day. The podcast of the day is Podcast Answer Man. Podcast Answer Man, run by Cliff Ravenscraft. Now, Podcast Answer Man is up on iTunes. You can find it there, and on his website, podcastanswerman.com, and on gspn.tv/podcastanswerman. It's up on there too. So, he also has a YouTube channel, Cliff Ravenscraft, where he pretty much just, again, he still helps you with his, with your podcast. So, yeah. That's what I was talking about at the beginning when I was comparing the Podcast Answer Man and the Podcast Info Man. Okay, so yeah. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Podcast Colby. I will see you next week. Tomorrow. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.